Okay, today we're going to be making some granola. I've chosen this recipe to do because it's super versatile. You have the base ingredients and then you can change it based for your preferences, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. So I'm going to talk you through how we're going to be making it. Always you're going to use your base as oats. For our oats we get them from Oats, which is one of our suppliers, which basically source all of their ingredients from local farms and local suppliers across England or within Britain. So always start with your oats for a granola. And then as well I'm going to be using a mixture of seeds. So you've got sunflower, pumpkin and buckwheat as well. And I'm using walnuts because I love walnuts. And then as well, to bind it all together, we're using honey, which I'm just slowly melting down here, along with veg oil and vanilla. Vanilla, you can use whatever you have access to, whatever you've got in your cupboards at home. This is vanilla pearls, but quite difficult to find, so you can use vanilla pods, vanilla essence, or you can just simply use sugar. But honey's for sweeten and vanilla's for the taste. So all of this again is based on your preferences. If you're allergic to nuts, don't put nuts. You can swap them out instead of with some seeds, extra seeds. And if I'm making this at home, I add dried fruit to it as well. So I'll explain later, but that all depends on the cooking for the end result of what you're going to get. So to start this off, obviously you got everything weighed out. The oats are in a big bowl because that's how we're going to mix it all together. And then you're just gently melting down your honey. You don't need it to be hot, just melt it down. And then when that's doing its thing, I'm going to add veg oil. Best oil to use for this is going to be veg, basically an oil without taste. If you're using olive or extra virgin, it's going to just add a different flavour to it, and especially after it's cooking, it's going to completely change it. So for this, I would recommend a non-flavoured oil. So that is about 3 tablespoons gone in there. You're just binding it together. And as well, the honey I've used was a crystallised one. So depending on what you're using, because you're just melting it down, it's absolutely perfect. If you've got slightly old honey, you don't know what to do with it, chuck it in a granola. For vanilla pearls, these are exceptionally strong, so I'm using just the tip of a spoon to go in there. If you're using vanilla pod, I would suggest about half of one, and for essence, just a teaspoon more or less. So you get all your wet ingredients there, as long as they're mixed together perfectly. And then oats in your bowl, very simple. Add all the dry ingredients together, so all your seeds of choice. The walnuts, I toasted them very gently earlier, 180 degrees, just until they start to get a bit of colour. That's when the flavours are being released a lot more. And then I just broke them up with my hands. These were halves, so they've still got a nice crunch and texture to them. Okay, and always, whatever you're making, sweet or savoury, pinch your salt. Salt isn't just to make something taste of salt, salt also brings out the flavour of the core flavour of what it is that you're making. So just mix it thoroughly, everything's dispersed nicely, like so. And then you're going to pour in your honey mix. So this is not only to sweeten it up, but is also going to bind it together nicely. So I'm going to add a little bit at a time, and you're going to see slowly it's coming together. Every time I've made this, I've always had to add all of the honey and veg oil, so everything's coated. And this is a fantastic recipe because you can completely change it up to however you like. Just think for the total of the seeds is about 180 grams, but I'll give the recipe later. So obviously, if you're using 4 seeds instead of 3, if you're doing something like this, just make sure the total weight is always going to be the same. Like this, you'll get the perfect texture every time. So now, simple, everything's coated nicely. It's all come together. So then step 2 of this is to put onto your baking trays. Now for this, use any tray at home. You can just put parchment paper on the bottom. We've got seal pack mats, so I am using them. And then depending how you like your granola, if you prefer clusters or if you prefer quite loose, is going to make a difference on how you're going to bake this, okay? So, just get it all out onto there. So if you like more of the clusters, it's important when you're doing this that it's quite flat. Because like this, it's going to cook really evenly. You're not going to have to break it up, so make sure it's just all together, but as flat as you can get it. I'm going to go over this with a Maurice. And if you prefer it more crumbly, then it doesn't have to be so perfect. You're just spreading it out loosely, and you're going to turn it a lot more in the oven. But when it's flatter and closer together, it's going to cook evenly from the bottom and to the top, which is why it's going to keep in the clusters. But when you're turning it more often to get everywhere brown, is when you're breaking it up and going to get a much looser texture on this. So as I said earlier, if you want to mix it up, if you put dried fruit in it, for me, I'll put my nuts and my seeds in now, and then halfway through cooking, I'm going to put the dried fruit in. Because if you put it in now, they're going to go really dry and just gets to a kind of gross texture. So, easy so far. Then we're going into oven. This is 150 degrees, no fan if possible, just so it's quite nice and gentle. And going to turn it every 10 minutes or so until it's a beautiful golden brown colour. They've been in for about 15-20 minutes or so. This is one that was spread a lot thinner and it'll be more cluster-like. You see in the centre, it still needs to be cooked a tiny bit more. And this is the clusters that was a lot thicker, so to be the crumbly granola. So with this one, you're going to just mix it around like so. Like this is going to cook it's going to cook evenly throughout, but you can see it's not really sticking together. With this one, you've already got clumps, bigger clumps here. So you're just going to let that do its thing for a little bit more. It's going to be in for less than 10 minutes, about 8 minutes or so. And this one will take about 10 more minutes in the oven, and that will be ready to go. So back in the oven. So these have just come out the oven. They're looking absolutely perfect. So what you're going to do is leave them to cool down, but on the tray, exactly like this, because when they're cooling down, they're going to harden up a little bit. So if you want it the crunchy loose, it's important as they're cooling that you're going to keep on stirring them like every 5-10 minutes or so. And then for your crunchy clusters, keep them like this, and then when they're cold, you'll be able to break them up and snap them up. So that's the finished product with granola. For me, I'd recommend this with either milk or with yogurt and with berries. Yeah, absolutely diverse, so you can make it exactly how you like in terms of your preferences. That's it, granola.